The scent of Thanksgiving turkey was still in the air when the final betrayal landed. My name is Grace Bennett. For years, I was the quiet engine of my family. I co-signed the mortgage, paid the heating bills, and funded the holidays they took credit for. I accepted my role as the invisible provider. But then I got the voicemail. My mother's voice, cold and rehearsed, telling me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. They had all agreed. They were happy to spend my money, but they didn't want me. They forgot one thing: the person paying the bills has the power. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The scent of caramelized sugar and roasting thyme hung heavy in the air, a thick, comforting blanket that ironically failed to warm the hollow spot in my chest. This was the scene of American abundance, the perfect suburban Thanksgiving tableau that Mom Carol Bennett spent the entire year curating: the antique silver, the hand-pressed linens, the fireplace glowing precisely to illuminate the framed photographs of our smiling family. Yet, as always, I stood on the periphery, watching the production unfold, not participating in the applause. I was the ghost in the machine, the financial engine quietly whirring beneath the polished veneer. For years, my loyalty had been measured in overlooked receipts. I was the reason the house felt this cozy in November. I was the one who quietly transferred funds into the joint heating account Richard, my father, was always forgetting about. The heirloom turkey. Mom was currently describing in excruciating detail to our Aunt Susan. I bought the organic one along with the $50 in forgotten groceries 2 days ago, tucking the bags into the pantry without a word. They never asked, and I never told. That was the unspoken contract I provide. I stabilize, I disappear. I loved them deeply, so I let myself be invisible. It seemed a small price to pay for family harmony. Ethan, my younger brother, was of course the center of the universe. He was late, but his absence only amplified the anticipation. When he finally strode in, flashing that effortless, blindingly charming smile, the same smile that had excused a lifetime of irresponsible behavior, Mom visibly defrosted. "There he is, my brilliant boy," she cooed, smoothing the lapel of his expensive brand-new coat. Ethan, mid-20s, handsome, utterly self-absorbed, and currently unemployed, accepted the praise like a king receiving tribute. "Rough drive, Mom," he said, not meeting my eye, already reaching for the first martini. Dad, ever the passive moderator, just gave a vague, approving nod. "Great to have you, son. You're the life of the party." I wondered if my presence 10 feet away was considered merely background noise for Ethan's arrival. I had spent the entire morning scrubbing the kitchen, but I knew my hands, red and chapped from the effort, would be ignored in favor of Ethan's eloquent explanation of his currently imaginary business venture. My contributions were always subtle, always framed as my duty, never my gift. I'd spent weekends remodeling the kitchen counters last spring, yet any mention of it was quickly deflected by Mom, who preferred to credit the great contractor. When I brought in the latest shipment of holiday baked goods, a carefully selected assortment from the expensive city bakery, Ethan simply snagged a ginger cookie and asked, "Did you remember to bring the good sparkling cider, Grace?" The cheap stuff gives me heartburn. My reward for quiet loyalty was being treated as the household administrator they didn't have to pay. I realized with a sickening jolt that I had been forcing myself to smile, forcing myself to be cheerful, in an empty bid for recognition that would never arrive. The true, cold snap of awareness didn't come during dinner, where I was inevitably seated at the end of the table, next to the coat closet. It came later that evening, when the planning usually began. Thanksgiving was merely the precursor to the main event, Christmas. Mom always ran the organization like a military operation, complete with shared Google Docs and frantic group messages. I was the primary gift purchaser, the logistics coordinator for travel, and the secret funder of the nice gifts. I instinctively reached for my phone, expecting the flurry of texts and pings. Silence. I opened the main family chat, expecting at least the usual banter about who got the best Black Friday deals. The last message was 3 weeks old, a mundane, forwarded joke from Dad. My fingers moved rapidly, searching through my email inbox. Nothing about Bennett Christmas 2025 planning. I tried the shared family Google Drive, navigating past folders of ancient baby photos and tax returns, and located the holiday planning folder. I clicked the document icon labeled Bennett Christmas Gift Assignments and Dinner Roster. The screen loaded bright and damning. The title was there, the dates were set. There was a column for names, a column for assignments, and a column for the gift budget. Ethan Mom, Dad, Aunt Susan, Cousin Maya, the list was complete. But my name, Grace Bennett, was missing. Not just missing from an assignment, but utterly absent from the list of attendees. The entire spreadsheet had been created, or more chillingly edited, with the deliberate intention of excluding me. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mistake. An algorithm hadn't failed. Someone, or perhaps all of them, had sat down and made a decision. A decision that had been meticulously documented and executed. My stomach turned to ice. The laughter drifting from the living room, Ethan telling a loud, self-aggrandizing story, sounded distant and distorted, like it was coming from a different world. They weren't simply overlooking me. They were actively, intentionally erasing me from the next major chapter of our family story. The festive lights of the perfect American home suddenly felt like harsh spotlights exposing a hidden systemic betrayal. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, the cold realization settling in my bones. They had made an intentional decision to exclude me from Christmas. The cold shock of the spreadsheet discovery didn't dissipate. It solidified into a hard metallic resolve. I wasn't going to cry, not yet. I was going to investigate. My family believed their betrayal was silent because they hadn't shouted it, but they had left a paper trail, a digital map of their calculated neglect. I spent the next hour meticulously checking every dark corner of our shared online existence. It wasn't enough to see my name was missing from the new roster. I needed to know if this was truly the first time the erasure had been intentional. I scrolled back through the last 5 years of holiday communications. I found the emails from 2 years ago where I had insisted on being CC'd on the grocery list, only to realize later they had started a separate chain discussing the wine list, intentionally excluding me because I was the only one who didn't drink, yet I was the one who paid for the cellar restocking. I found a text exchange from last Christmas where Mom had told Ethan I was unavailable to pick up Dad's prescription, even though I had messaged her 10 minutes prior saying I was 5 minutes away. She simply preferred to ask Ethan, turning the simple chore into a performance of his helpfulness. The pieces snapped together with a terrible clarity. It wasn't simple forgetfulness. It was a strategy, a slow, systematic dehumanization. Every overlooked contribution, every time Dad complimented Ethan's future potential over my demonstrable stability, every time Mom dismissed my financial input as just Grace being careful, it was all part of the act. They were belittling my worth to justify their emotional and, more importantly, financial parasitism. Why was I still giving so much to a family that didn't see me? The question hammered against the walls of my loyalty. I felt a profound sense of humiliation rooted not in their rejection, but in my own internalized desperation for their approval. I had become defined by my usefulness, and now that my usefulness was being dismissed alongside my personhood, I felt hollowed out. My thoughts spiraled back to the sacrifices, the physical weight of my loyalty. I remembered the late nights spent with Blueprints 5 years ago co-signing the mortgage when the bank flagged Richard's unsteady freelance income. I was the financial safety net they draped over their precarious suburban comfort. That house, the one currently filled with the warm, toxic glow of their Thanksgiving happiness, was partly mine. I put my career, my future solvency on the line for their ease. And the kitchen, the one Carol boasted about to her friends, I funded 90% of the renovation, working with the contractor on weekends, while Carol took the credit, claiming her eye for design made all the difference. I even remembered the year I bought Dad the expensive custom-made fishing rod, a gift I knew he'd never buy for himself, only for Ethan to take credit, claiming he was the one who researched the model. I felt rage, not the hot, explosive kind, but a cold, dense fury that settled in my gut. I pushed away from the kitchen table, leaving the ghost of Thanksgiving behind, and retreated to my small, meticulously organized home office. This room held my real power, my financial life. I pulled out the file cabinet, the one where the mortgage documents, utility contracts, property insurance papers, and years of meticulously paid household bills resided. The stack of financial documents was immense, a physical manifestation of my silent labor. I ran my hand over the contracts, seeing my name, Grace Bennett, in bold legal print next to theirs. For years, I had upheld the American values they only pretended to embody: loyalty, responsibility, and fairness. I had taken personal responsibility for their security, believing in the reciprocal fairness of a functional family unit. Now they were embracing a cultural shadow self-interest, entitlement, and abandonment. I began to sort through the papers, not just looking, but studying the fine print. Mortgage payment schedules, the automatic transfers I had set up for the gas and electric company, the legal clauses about co-signing liability. I was staring at the scaffolding of their comfortable life, scaffolding that was built and maintained by my money, my credit, and my ignored effort. My fingers traced the lines of the utility contract. I had attached my name and bank account for automatic payments to ensure the heat never went out. This was the point of leverage, the area where my quiet control was absolute. A slow, chilling idea began to form, asserting control, not with a raised voice, but with a deliberate surgical removal of the foundation they took for granted. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted agency. As I sat there, the quiet intensity broken only by the rustle of paper, my phone chimed on the desk. An incoming call from Mom. My heart rate kicked up instantly, not with hope, but dread. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to engage in the polite lies they would offer if they thought I was about to ask questions. The recording started immediately, Carol's voice sounding flat, emotionless, and utterly rehearsed, as if reading from an index card. "Grace, it's Mom. I just wanted to leave a quick message. We all talked, and we decided it would be best for everyone if you just spent Christmas at your place this year. It's too much stress having everyone here." We all agreed. "You're not welcome this year." There was a barely perceptible pause, a breath held or forgotten, and then the line clicked dead. No apology, no explanation of why they had all agreed, purely a verdict delivered without the slightest trace of maternal warmth or regret. It was the final devastating confirmation that the betrayal was absolute, collective, and cold-blooded. I listened to Mom's dead rehearsed voice one more time, then deleted the voicemail forever. The emptiness in my stomach was replaced by a strange surgical calm. There were no tears, only a profound stillness. Her words, "We all agreed. You're not welcome this year," had served not as a punishment, but as a key unlocking me from the prison of loyalty I had built around myself. They had formally declared our relationship transactional, and now I would respond in kind. I stared again at the stack of documents: mortgage liability forms, utility account statements, receipts for the kitchen renovation, which totaled nearly $20,000 of my own savings. I didn't just feel overlooked, I realized I had been systematically leveraged. My emotional value was zero, but my credit score and salary were paramount. They wanted the benefits of my life without the inconvenience of my presence. The transaction was over. My agency began now. My decision was not rooted in petty revenge, but in the need for self-preservation and justice. This was not about making them cold. This was about retrieving my future, which was tied up in their past. I began the methodical process of extraction. First, the utilities. They were the most immediate lever. The autopay function was tied solely to my checking account, a feature I insisted on years ago to prevent late fees. I spent 2 hours on hold with the regional energy company. My voice was level, almost inhumanly calm, as I requested the removal of my name and bank account from the family address. I informed them I was no longer an occupant and wished to terminate my contractual liability for the supply. I repeated the request to the gas and water providers. The customer service representative warned me that this would necessitate a complete service disruption and transfer, which would take effect in exactly 2 weeks. I confirmed the date December 24th, Christmas Eve. It was the most deliberate decision I had ever made. I documented every step. I opened my cloud storage and created a new folder naming it simply Exit Plan. Into this folder, I dragged screenshots of the utility cancellation requests, digital copies of the mortgage co-signing agreement, copies of emails proving my payments for property tax and insurance over the last 3 years, and photographs of the kitchen remodel receipts. This wasn't just my proof of payment, it was my moral justification. I was arming myself not for a fight, but for an inevitable inquiry. I needed undeniable clarity. The most difficult and lengthy process was beginning the formal procedure to remove my name from the co-signed mortgage liability. It was a complex, slow-moving beast of bureaucracy. I called the bank and began the preliminary paperwork, knowing it would take months, but the process had to start now. The moment I verbally initiated the transfer of liability, I felt a physical weight lift from my shoulders. That house, which had been a beautiful cage, was slowly ceasing to be my financial burden. As the days passed, marked by the quiet clicks of my mouse executing financial separation, the emotional stakes around me heightened. Ethan, oblivious to my work, sent a passive-aggressive text. "Everything okay, Grace? Mom was hoping you'd stop by the store this weekend for the wine shipment. Don't bail on us last minute like last time. Don't bail on us." The sheer audacity of the accusation when they had explicitly uninvited me made me laugh a short, dry, humorless sound. I filed the screenshot in my exit plan folder and did not reply. Mom followed up with a vague email complaining about the stress of gift wrapping, hoping I would offer my services. Ignored. Documented. They were testing the boundaries, seeking to extract labor even after issuing the verdict. The only bright spot, the single piece of validation that kept me from second-guessing my sanity, arrived late one evening. A private message from cousin Maya. "Hey, I saw the Christmas spreadsheet. I just wanted you to know that I see you. And I know it's messed up. Whatever you decide to do, I support you. We all know how much you've done for them." Maya's brief message was a lifeline. It confirmed that the betrayal was known, not just felt. I wasn't crazy. They were cruel. Her validation fueled my final steps. The final day of the 2-week countdown arrived Christmas Eve. The town outside was blanketed in a perfect, picturesque layer of fresh snow. I watched a movie in my small apartment, strangely calm. I had finalized the transfer requests. There was nothing left to do but wait for the inevitable procedural click. At exactly 5:17 p.m., mid-sentence of the movie's crescendo, the lights in my own apartment flickered momentarily, a ghost signal from the grid. Then my phone buzzed with 3 rapid-fire texts from the utility company's service termination, complete at 123 Maple Street. I pictured the scene: Carol arranging the final ornaments on the 15-foot tree I helped pay for. Richard settled in his favorite chair reading the paper. Ethan likely complaining about being cold, already demanding more attention. The moment the power went out, the silence in that house, the house I supported, would have been deafening. The perfect festive machine I had been forced to maintain had just ground to a deliberate, absolute halt. The family was left scrambling in the dark, cold comfort of a Christmas they had decided to celebrate without me. The moment the utilities at Maple Street ceased functioning, the storm broke, but not where the family expected. They anticipated a phone call from me, panicked and apologetic, explaining a forgotten transfer. Instead, my phone became a receiver for their frantic, entitled panic, a chaotic barrage of messages that lasted through Christmas Day. The messages were exactly as predicted. Confusion quickly hardened into aggressive entitlement and guilt-tripping. Ethan, of course, was the loudest. "What the hell, Grace? The heat is out. The pipes are going to freeze. You can't just ignore the house we grew up in. Fix this right now." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't apologize for the exclusion. He demanded his comfort be restored. Mom's calls were more controlled, laced with sharp emotional manipulation. "Richard is so upset, Grace. You've ruined his Christmas. After everything we've done for you, how could you be so selfish? This is just about money, isn't it? You're making a point at the expense of your father's health." Note the passive voice: I had ruined Christmas, not their decision to erase me from it. I documented every single one of them, filing the proof of their immediate focus on the material loss rather than the relational one into the exit plan folder. The news of the unpowered house spread quickly among their neighbors, forcing them to confront the material reality of my absence, not just the emotional one. They had to explain why their perfect holiday was suddenly dark and cold. In contrast to their digital chaos, my apartment was a sanctuary of quiet, measured peace. I woke up on Christmas morning to the sound of snow falling softly against the window. I didn't rush to light the enormous, demanding Christmas tree or frantically check on the roasting bird. Instead, I made myself a perfect cup of coffee, the aroma mingling only with the simple scent of the vanilla candle I had lit. I sat by the window reading a book I had meant to finish for months. It was a small act, almost laughably mundane, but in its self-determination, I found immense joy. I was no longer defined by their chaotic approval or their impossible expectations. I was simply Grace, enjoying her morning. I took a long walk through the neighborhood that afternoon. The festive lights and perfect cheer of other homes didn't inspire resentment, but quiet reflection. I realized my sense of self-worth had been entirely dependent on my family's acknowledgement of my contributions. Now that approval was irrevocably gone, and yet I was still standing. I was resilient. The betrayal had not broken me. It had clarified me. My emotional clarity was absolute. I accepted that my love for them was unconditional, but their love for me was demonstrably conditional, tied directly to my utility. My self-reliance didn't mean isolation, however. This was the moment for authentic connection. I called Maya, who was staying with a friend for the holidays, to avoid the fallout. "You're okay, right?" Maya asked, her voice genuinely concerned. "I'm better than okay, Maya," I replied. "I'm free. I took the leap." She sighed with relief. "Good. It's brutal over there. They're blaming you, of course, saying you're unstable. But no one is helping them fix the utilities, are they? They're running around like headless chickens because they can't even operate a basic household account." Our conversation was meaningful and restorative. It anchored me in the belief that genuine bonds, fairness, mutual respect, and honesty still existed, just not within the confines of my immediate family. Later, Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, dropped off a plate of cookies, just a simple act of community kindness, checking in. These small moments solidified the American cultural value I had always believed in. Self-reliance is vital, but a healthy life is built on community, not just blood relation. I spent the next few days processing the moral landscape. Loyalty, I concluded, had to be reciprocal. Generosity without boundaries was self-destruction. I accepted the grief for the family I thought I had and embraced the freedom of the family I knew I was leaving behind. Personal freedom was paramount, and the price of their acceptance was too high. I was no longer angry. I was simply self-possessed. The flurry of manipulative messages settled into a tense silence after 2 days. They realized the noise wasn't working. The utility account had been transferred back into Richard's name. They figured it out eventually, though not without significant financial penalty. Then late one evening, a simple tentative text arrived from Mom. It wasn't an apology, nor was it an outright attack. It was an olive branch woven with curiosity and control. "We need to discuss the house, Grace. Richard is considering selling since the maintenance is so high now. We need your opinion on the mortgage situation." The text was a recognition of my financial power, but it was still framed as a demand for my opinion rather than my presence. I looked at the text, the last thin attempt to reel me back into the emotional and financial manipulation. I was grounded now, my boundaries clear and self-determined. I knew exactly what my reply would be, procedural and final, but not yet. I let the text sit, enjoying the quiet power of my silence. The storm was over, and I was steering my own ship. Mom's text about needing my opinion on the house sat unread for a full 24 hours. It was a thinly veiled attempt to pull me back into their orbit, to leverage my financial knowledge for their convenience. When I finally replied, it was not with emotion or a personal rebuke, but with a cold procedural clarity that reflected the finality of my decision. I have already contacted the bank and initiated the transfer of my liability for the co-signed mortgage. The necessary legal paperwork is with my attorney, who will finalize the transfer of all remaining legal responsibilities to you and Dad. Any future financial decisions regarding the house are entirely yours. Please coordinate through the attorney. I knew the response would sting because it was impersonal, deliberate, and final. It left no room for emotional manipulation or argument. My empowerment was not found in a dramatic confrontation, but in the methodical execution of paperwork. Over the next 2 weeks, the final documents were processed. The house at Maple Street, the house I had helped stabilize, insure, and renovate, was no longer legally or financially mine. The resolution was procedural, definitive, and liberating. The immediate aftermath was silence. They had been forced to face the true cost of their comfortable life, and the effort to cover their sudden financial responsibility left them with little energy for emotional warfare. I spent the quiet period between Christmas and New Year reflecting on the past and the strange new peace that had settled over me. I sat on my couch one afternoon, watching the gray winter light fade, and allowed a single clear memory to surface. A past Christmas Eve 5 years ago, standing in the cold garage, frantically wrapping 37 presents alone because Carol had demanded the dining room be spotless for photos. I remembered the burning resentment, the raw exhaustion, and the desperate, unacknowledged hope that someone would notice my labor. Now that hope was dead and its absence was clarifying. I realized I didn't miss the performance. I missed the idea of the functional family. My self-worth had been a ghost haunting their approval, but now it was solid, resting within me, independent of their acknowledgement. Absence was not emptiness, it was peace. The celebration of my agency was quiet, but profound. I consciously began crafting new traditions. New Year's Eve. A night I had previously spent helping Mom clean up the detritus of a messy holiday party was now my own. I hosted a small heartfelt gathering in my apartment. Maya was there, and I invited Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor, who brought a bottle of sparkling cider and genuine conversation. We didn't talk about betrayal or utility bills. We talked about books, future plans, and simple shared dreams. This new community was built on mutual respect and genuine care, fulfilling the true promise of connection. There was a subtle closure with my family, not a conversation but an observation. I saw a social media post from Ethan, a photo of the house exterior looking somewhat less manicured than usual. Richard was standing outside looking tired. The caption was vague, something about tough beginnings to the year. They were struggling to maintain the facade, and they were finally feeling the weight of the responsibility I had shouldered. A few weeks later, Mom tried a final muted attempt at reconciliation, a carefully worded email. "We realize how much you contributed, Grace. Things are difficult now. We hope you know the door is always open." I read the message, and I felt nothing. No surge of anger, no pang of obligation, and most importantly, no desire to rush through that open door. I didn't need to argue, forgive, or chase validation. I simply observed their realization, noting the transactional nature of their sentiment. Difficulty had bred their acknowledgement. I deleted the email without reply. My final emotional beat was not triumph, but a settled resilience. I looked around my small, quiet apartment filled with the simple, self-chosen objects that defined my life. The betrayal had been acute, the cost high, but it had stripped away the toxic illusion and left behind a core of self-reliant strength. My boundaries were established, my contributions recognized by the only person who truly needed to see them, myself. The holiday season was truly over, and I knew with a certainty that calmed every lingering tremor of fear and grief that my life was now fully and irrevocably my own. The quiet victory was the most lasting kind. And with that quiet finality, Grace Bennett closed the chapter on her betrayal, embracing the peace of her new independence. If you found Grace's journey compelling, please consider subscribing to Revenge Hour for more stories of self-reclamation. We are deeply interested in your thoughts on this situation and read every single comment. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.